Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps get my channel promoted. And an important thing to note today, this is my 300th YouTube video. So, wow, I can't believe that I've made that many videos, but here we are. I'm kind of a science and a science fiction nerd, and I was feeling like making a cuff bracelet today, so I thought it might be kind of fun to combine the two. And so I picked out some stones to represent some planets, and we're going to do kind of a big cuff bracelet with multiple stones that look like they're orbiting. And so this may end up being called an orbital bracelet, but we'll see. Before we get started on this, I wanted to thank some groups of people. First off, my patrons are my core followers, and I really appreciate their support. It's a really great group of people on Patreon, and I love the things they're doing over there, and I hope that they're getting as much out of it as I am. So thanks for your support. The second group is my YouTube subscribers. We just passed 10,000 subscribers, which I never ever thought I'd see, and I really appreciate that. Thank you not only for subscribing, but for the nice comments and the little contributions like the buy me a coffee and super thanks. Those things really help out with supplies, so thank you for that. All right, well, let's get started on this project. And these are my design idea books. I have about 5 different designs on the merch store. Put some different ones at the top of the video so you can see what some of the other ones look like. It's been super useful for me to get into the habit of drawing up designs before I actually start working on the project. I usually get a way better outcome, and these ones have a nice little grid in the background to help me keep things kind of symmetrical. So I was thinking like this, with some multiple depths to it. Kind of maybe I might put this one and this one kind of in line with the band on this cuff bracelet, and then I think I might mount this on top of that, and then this on top of that and the band. This one just on top of, I don't know, I'm kind of playing it by ear as I do this one, but I think it'll be kind of fun to play with the levels of it. This will be the only one that's actually sitting on top of the band, I think. And the stones I picked out, I made 3 of the bezels in advance because it's going to take a while to make 4 bezels. And I'll do one in front of the camera so you can watch me make a bezel, but this is a little moonstone that I picked for that one. This is a lapis, round lapis. I don't know what this yellow stone is. It kind of has the look of that aventurine has, but it's yellow, so I don't know. It's got a little sparkliness inside of it, but I think that'll make for a good sun. I've had that for years, and I never really knew what it was. I picked it up in a box of stones or something. So. And then this is a little bit of carnelian. So in my mind, this was the sun, this is Mercury, this is the Earth, and that's the moon around the Earth. So, but I think that's kind of the pattern that I'm going to lay it out as. This is going to be 8-gauge half-round wire. This will be 14-gauge square. I actually just rolled it out in the rolling mill at the last video. So if you haven't seen that one, I'll put a link up there for you. So I'm using some of that. And then I'm going to flatten it a little bit with my chasing hammer. If you watched that last video, you saw that my rolling mill has a broken roller on it. And so I can't actually roll stuff flatter in it right now. I have to order a new roller. But I can pound it flat, and I did a little test to see if I was going to be able to pound it a little flatter and still have it look pretty symmetrical. And you know, I think it's okay once I file it and then clean it up. I just wanted it to be a little narrower than 14, but also have some of the structural integrity of 14. So, all right, so first thing we're going to do is make the bezel for this stone, so we'll do that. If any of you know what that stone is or have an idea, let me know what you think in the comments. I should probably figure out how big this stone is to give you a sense of perspective. That's about what I would have guessed, about 20 millimeters. It's going to be about 10, 7-ish, and then maybe 5. So let's make a bezel. For this, I'm going to use I use 3/16 or 4.76 millimeter tall-ish bezel, and I'm using oops, that's not the right stuff. 26 gauge, which is just a little thicker than some. Kind of looks like an egg yolk. Maybe I should be making an egg pendant or something like that. That might be kind of funny. Where can I get more of these stones? I'll just go ahead and make a mark. Leave a little leeway for filing purposes. Everybody asked me about these shears. They're just Fisker's craft shears. A couple of other things that I usually mention at the beginning of the video is I use primarily hard silver sheet solder. I use a liquid flux called My-T-Flux that I spray on with a spray bottle. My torch is an acetylene air torch made by Smith called the Smith Silversmith torch. It used to be called the Smith Handy Heat, but they changed the name some time ago. Gallery where I have some of my work called today and told me that one of my pieces had sold, which was nice. Always good news to hear that. It was this one that I made quite a while ago. I think I called it a structural statement ring or something like that. If you're interested, I'll put a link up there. Some stuff online as well. If you're interested, my website's link would be right there. You can see some of the stuff I've made here. You can also just ask me if I still have something, because sometimes things don't quite get up to the website very quickly. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to cut a little bit of the solder. Not very much. Make sure my torch is turned on. I use a #1 tip on my torch. That's another question I get asked quite a bit. Just going to do a little bit of reshaping. Pretty good on size, I think. So we'll just put a bottom on this. Bottoms on these don't need to be super thick, so I'm going to use 26 gauge. Always when I make bezels, I always leave a little bit of extra on the outside, even if I'm going to cut it off. That gives you a little bit more surface area to point that torch at to raise the temperature of the sheet. It's going to be beneath the bezel. The reason that's an issue is bezel is pretty easy to melt when it's sitting all exposed up top like that. So while you're trying to get the sheet underneath it up to the right temperature for it to solder correctly, sometimes people, especially when they're first starting out, will have a tendency to melt their bezel before it ever brings the sheet up to temperature, if that makes sense. When you're doing a big cuff bracelet like this one, you're going to need something that produces a lot of heat. So if you're using one of those little handheld butane torches like they use for creme brulee, those You can do some little things with those, but you can't do a lot of big stuff because you need something that pumps out a lot more heat. So even the plumber's propane torches, you know, when I'm doing a bracelet that's going to be not only spread out wide like this when I'm soldering it, it's got quite a bit of mass in it. And for one of those little torches to get this whole thing up to temperature to solder things effectively is going to be super hard to do, because silver loses heat quickly and it gains heat quickly. So while you're heating over here, this is cooling off. While you're heating over here, this is cooling off. So it's kind of a battle between, you know, if you're using a little small flame, you know, pumping the heat in effectively enough to where the whole thing reaches, in this case of the hard silver solder that I'm using, 1450 degrees. Occasionally I see people doing stuff like this, but they cut these little tiny pieces of solder and they put like 30 of them in here, which I think shouldn't matter too much, honestly, because if you have your two pieces of metal where they meet along a seam like this, once you get the whole thing up to the right temperature, it'll kind of wick right along that length. So you could technically put them all over against one side over here. If you get the whole thing hot enough, it should wick all the way around. So, with bigger bezels, sometimes I suggest to people that they kind of lift them up and get the heat underneath. That way it gives them a little preheating for that piece of sheet that's on the bottom without exposing the bezel to any direct flame right off the bat. If that makes any sense. As it is, I'm actively avoiding the bezel here, pointing it at the sheet. See the solder starting to flow now. Once it starts flowing, if you go all the way around the whole thing, make sure it pulls it all the way along the length of that seam. Should be good, I think. I think we're good. Next step, I think, is we need to make the band. And if I remember right, I measured it to be about 7¼ inches, which came out to be about like that. So I'll cut another piece of this. This is that 6-gauge half round, pretty heavy half round wire. When you're bending wire, if you have the problem where when you're bending it, it ends up looking worse than it started. One of the things I've found is these flat nose pliers like this. If you use them to hold the piece, it gives you some leverage if you hold it further away, or if you need to specifically get it to bend in a spot. I'm not bending with the pliers, I'm bending with my hands. So I'm just holding with the pliers. That way you don't mess up the metal much, and it's much easier to get a pretty smooth, straight line. Looks pretty good. Not bad. Good enough for what we're doing, I think. So I had a center mark here before, but I'm going to double check after I get these all filed because it may move just a tiny bit. I sort of like filing. I find filing relaxing. Unlike sawing, which I still view with a little bit of apprehension. Alright. Sometimes I will, let's see this or not. We use the edge of the table like this. If you have a sharp edge table, you can kind of push it sideways. I don't know if you can see that. I was pushing down like this. Great camera work by Chad. Okay. So we get kind of a sideways bend. I kind of tried to calculate what the angle was on this one to get it this far apart, and that's actually like from outside edge to outside edge is about 5 centimeters or 2 inches-ish. That needs to go a little bit further. another thing you can do, as long as you can keep it flat on the table, you can hold it like this, bend it that way, that works too. Either way, you're probably going to want to go back and make sure that the ends are still sitting flat and the rest of it is still sitting flat, because it has a tendency, when you try to bend something against the way it wants to bend, where like it's wider dimension, it's going to try and twist in order to make that bend easier. And so we're actively trying to force it to stay flat when we do it. And if you don't, it does that weird twisty thing. So, and it usually does just a tiny bit anyway, so you may have to go back and do a little correcting. So let's do that second one. We'll do this one just this way. That's not bad. So we want these to bend back about right. Right here. We should be able to kind of mark that on all of these. And these ones we have to bend back the other direction. And this is going to be hard for some people if you don't have very strong hands. So what you could do is you could file a little notch on the outside right where each of these is. And that'll make it slightly easier to bend, and then you'll just go ahead and solder that piece closed there. Sometimes if you use some leverage, see, I way overbent that, so I'm going to have to bend it back a little bit. I almost always overbend these when I do this. These two should add up to that angle. So it doesn't usually have to be. It just needs to line up straight with each other like that. And then these two the same. I think that's going to be fine. So I'm going to cut a couple of small pieces of 26 gauge sheet that's going to go up to that point on the bottom of these. So I'm going to have them stick out a little bit more than they need to. I've been asking viewers to put some questions in the comment section so I can put together a question and answer video. And one of my frequent commenters, Gaz, is always very complimentary. But how come you Americans always pronounce the L in solder? Or don't pronounce the L in solder? Which I didn't realize until a couple of years ago that people in Europe and Australia pronounce it solder. So I am interested in the answer to that as well. Probably the same reason that we pronounce aluminium aluminum. Aluminium sounds way cooler anyway. If we're having a not very hot course, you'll start to have problems because there's a lot of mass in this wire, and getting this whole thing up to temperature is a little challenging with a smaller tool. I think I was quite in contact there. there's a little space between the two pieces of silver, the solder doesn't like to jump that gap. So I just had to push it together a little bit better and add a little more solder. I usually round these ends down. You don't want to make any jewelry that's too stabby. Not good for repeat customers. First one I want to do is this one right there, and I already kind of shaped this piece, so we're going to start with him, I think, and then I'll show you how I flattened this and stuff. Let's make a mark where they're supposed to connect. You could, if you wanted to, place little pieces of solder on top of those. I do what's called pick soldering. Put a link to a video up there about it. It's a really useful skill. I want you to pick up a chunk of solder like this, so you have it on the end of the pick. You can pretty precisely place where you want it to go. But the trick is you don't want to stick it in there until the piece of silver is up to the soldering temperature. Okay, that's pretty good. Dry this off a little better. My thought on this one is I think I'm going to make this little one next, and I'm actually going to sever it so it goes through this one, because this one that goes all the way across there, I want that one to be on top of this one. Same way I want this one. Actually, I could probably do this one next. So I'm going to flatten out some this way and this way. So this has probably gotten a little brittle and hard from pounding, so let's anneal it. Okay, I have that one. I have these two that I annealed, and we're going to do this shorter one that's slightly shorter. We should do right around here. And so I'm going to use, I made this a little while back on my lathe, hardwood, because sometimes there's a time when you need to bend something that's kind of in between a bracelet mandrel and a ring mandrel. You can also just find something in the right diameter, and then just pretty good. I'm just going to file these at an angle like I did that other one. Next one, I think we need to do this one, because I'm going to cut that one so it goes through this one. So that'll be there. I pre-made this one while I was off camera just a minute ago. This is going to mount on top of that. So I need to make it kind of like that shape. Let's see if I can do the same thing I did on this one. Well, that's pretty good for a first try. Okay, I think what I'm going to do, as far as getting this where I want it to be, is I'm going to file these ends so that it matches up nicely there. And then I'm going to mark where this cuts through this other one. Cut the middle piece out of there, solder this in, take off a little bit so it fits right back in there, and solder it back in. So, like that. And I can make a little scratch right on the outside there. We should be able to see those scratches now. We can cut that piece out of there. It's getting a little goobered up. I'm going to pickle it for a while. clean up a little bit, and then I cut little pieces out of these two so that I can solder them in. Let's try flat one and a piece of square. We'll try that. That's better. So I should be able to cut that piece out, and then I should be able to sit it right on there. Just like that, I think. So, in order to get some soldered onto this part here, I'm going to pre-melt a little solder. It's called sweat soldering on the back of this bezel. So I'll flux that up. Just want to make sure that's pretty centered. Last thing, I'm going to double check. Make sure I got a solder joint there. Looks like I do. That didn't solder to anything, so we're golden there. Okay, I think it's time to pickle this, and then when I come back I will probably have to set 3 of the stones, but I will set this last one. So, all right. So I set these 3. This one I'm still about to set, so I do this differently than a lot of people do. A lot of people use a bezel pusher and a burnishing tool. I use the flat side of this and then the smooth outer part of the chain nose pliers. So I start by pushing straight in. Putting a little bit of downward pressure with my thumb too, just to be in there tight. I don't know what this stone is, so I want to be careful not to slip in case it's a little on the soft side. Could even be amber, I suppose. I've seen amber that was opaque like this, and kind of that almost lemony color. Alright, so when it's all pushed in, then I'm going to use this part. Just do a little bit of burnishing on the top, just rubbing. If you have an idea what you think this stone might be, leave me a comment. Okay. Last steps are going to be probably bending this into a shape that's more bracelet shaped. And then I'll use the Dremel with a fine polishing bit to kind of smooth out the tops of the bezels, and maybe if I can get a little bit better in here. These spots are always hard to polish, so I'll do my best, but we'll get that reshaped and I'll take some better pictures and we'll be done. So I think that's kind of cool. That's what I was shooting for, right? Basically. Alright, well that was the orbital bracelet. I hope that you enjoyed that, and if you did, make sure to hit the like button before you check out here. You might also want to check out some of my other content. I have, like I said, 300 videos now, so there's a lot to choose from. An easy way to navigate it is to go to the playlist tab and look through the different playlists, and then you can find more specifically what you're looking for a little more easily. The other thing is, check out the video description down below if you'd like to become more of a supporter of the channel. There's information about my Patreon there. There's a link to my merch store where you can get those nice design idea books. There's a link to the Buy Me Coffee if you want to just make a little contribution. And there's also a link to my website if you want to get yourself a nice piece of jewelry that I've made. So thank you for watching today. Take care and happy silversmithing.